Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in their fields of health and wellness practice, hear their stories, and learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. And I'm happy to introduce today's guest, Sherimane Johnson. Welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for the welcome.
It's
Excited to
great to
be here.
have you here. Yes. For those of you that haven't met her, Charmaine is an author. She's a certified holistic health coach, a vegan chef, and owner of three vegan businesses and a podcast. And I love the names, so I'm just going to tell you the names of all of them. One of them is Night Owl Vegan, Naturally Sweet Desserts, Plant Powered Shift, and Why We Vegan. Her businesses provide products and services that are dedicated to the promotion of health, wellness, and sustainability through the power of food. Sherimane has a successful career in information technology, leading multi-million dollar projects and managing international teams in the finance and healthcare industries, and is a certified AI consultant. She was born in New York City, studied at the New York University Wagner School for Public Policy, and has a BS degree in behavioral science from Mercy College. She's the mom of two and a fur baby, an advocate for food as medicine, and loves stand-up comedy. So I am just really excited to have you here. And you have such an interesting background. It's very unique blend of experiences and interests. And today we're going to be diving into your personal experience around a lifestyle change and what it did for you. But I'd like to start by just asking you, how did you get started being interested in health? Was it through your own journey or was there some interest before that? Kind of what was the beginning?
The beginning was my grandmother's experience with
Mm,
diabetes. We lived in Harlem in a food desert. She was an insulin dependent diabetic. And as we went through her journey, I can see that when she passed away, she was taking 16 medications. Clearly, now that I know what I know, that in no way is going to do anything to heal her. But
mm,
and she eventually passed away from all the complications of diabetes.
yeah.
When I became a diabetic, um, I was going down the same path as my grandmother, and they were just trying to give me just medicine, but not really asking me questions. So when I figured out what to do, um, and it was working for me, I just kind of felt like I needed to share it with as many people as possible because I didn't want anybody else to go through what I did because she's my
Mm,
beloved Eva.
mm.
Um, and my community is just, suffering. But also there's a responsibility from the doctor's perspective, which I've learned that I wish that I knew then what I knew now. I would have advocated more for her, but they wouldn't have listened to me anyway because they just don't. But that's where it started from my
Mm.
grandmother. And then once I figured out something that was working for me, I felt like I needed to share that.
I love that. And so many times, our stories start with our parents, our grandparents, family things. I totally resonate. It was my grandparents that both had diabetes. And, we see that in my family quite widespread as well. And so we
Hmm.
we know that it's something that's affecting so many people today. And when we met just a few weeks ago, I so enjoyed listening to a presentation you were giving to a different community. And today we're talking about a different subject, but getting acquainted with you and having some conversations around your journey was so inspiring to me. I really wanted to bring you on today because I know your story will be inspiring to others as well. So tell me more about how your personal story started. You said you were diagnosed with diabetes. How old were you when that happened and kind of
Oh,
what led
it
up
was
to that?
late. I think I was 43.
Mm,
Now, had never known or didn't have it, but stress is a big thing. I was a single
yeah.
parent, two kids in grad school, working full time, and unhealthy relationships.
Oh boy.
And you tend to eat, but I think Wendy's, I think Happy Meals and Wendy's, and I thought I was doing something good for my, a little bit of salad here and there. But Eventually, I found out that my sugars were high, and I didn't want to go down the same path as my grandmother, so I reluctantly took the medicine. And at some point in the journey, I was on 1,500 milligrams of metformin 3 times a day. And my sugars were still 300 when I got
Oh,
home at 9 o'clock at night after grad school.
mm,
And I would ask the doctor, I'm like, this is not work. Plus all of the side effects that come from metformin, your stomach, your arms, palpitating heart, stomach issues, jittery, sweating. But I'm taking all this medicine. And I just
mm,
kind of felt like the doctors weren't listening to me. So what really made me, and I work with my dietitian, and then, my sugars were going down a
mhm,
little bit, but I was just felt like I was on too much medication and the doctor wasn't listening to me. So what really made me decide to change was during one appointment, I was like, why are you giving me so much medication? And I think he was annoyed with me because I would always ask him questions
mhm.
about and he always was trying to give me insulin. And he's like, oh, this is just an injectable. I'm like, but that's the same. He was like, no, it's not, Miss Johnson. Talking to me like I was 12. I'm like, listen, no, this is not right. I don't want to stick anything. And plus I have skin issues. I mean, you can put like you know how your jeans have like the metal piece
Yeah.
on the inside? I get a
Uh-huh.
hive from that. That's laying against my skin. So I know I can't inject myself over and over. Plus, I was trying to get off the medicine. He's like,
Right.
Miss Johnson, medicine is not made for you anyway. Medicine is made um uh on the physiology. I remember it so clearly. The physiology of a 6'1", 180-pound white male. All medicine is made from that formulation. So it's not an exact science. I was like, but sir, I'm 5'1", 152 at the time, a little heavy, but I'm like, but it's not working for me. He flipped me the prescription and said, if you're not serious about your diabetes, you'll be in dialysis in 5 years. I think it was 2007 I was diagnosed. I
Wow.
haven't been had any medicine in 16 years.
Mm,
So the way he talked to me and how I saw they treated my grandmother, I was like, they are trying to kill us. I just really felt like there
mm,
was
yeah.
something sinister about the fact. And then they were so happy to give me more prescriptions, never asked me about my stress. And as I
Mm,
started learning about why diabetics, why our I don't know what you want to call it, sugars, for lack of a better word, why
yeah.
insulin levels increase. It stress is a big, big part of it. And my life was full of stress. Plus, I
Mhm.
was eating the McDonald's because I didn't know any better. So I was eating processed food. I was eating cheese. I was eating all those things.
Yeah.
Plus, I had a day that started at 5:30 in the morning with a really stressful tech job and ended at 9 p.m. at night with my kids in morning daycare, after school. It's a
Yeah.
lot going on. They never once asked me those questions, but I'm learning now that they're not taught to ask those questions. So the way
Right.
that he was so dismisses
Hmm.
dismissive of me, I was like, no, because if I passed away, my kids would have been orphans. And
Mm,
I knew that I cannot take 4,500 milligrams of metformin a day. That's just
mm,
not, it can't be right. And I just
yeah.
felt like, and they also were mad that I wasn't taking the statins and I wasn't taking the water pills. So there's a cocktail that you get when you walk in and you say diabetes, statins, water pills, and metformin. I'm like, well, can you even like do a physical? Everybody's body is different.
Yeah.
So that once I learned that, and then I started picking around and read the China syndrome. They didn't have, what the health and all that stuff back then in
Yeah.
2007, but just more and more information about what happens to our food and the
Mm,
antibiotics and steroids. I'm like, well, then that clearly has some correlation because the medicine and the antibiotics and my body's inability to
hmm.
regulate metabolically, there has to be some, in my opinion, some correlation there. Plus, our bodies are not made for steroids and antibiotics.
Yeah.
That's not, we don't know, our bodies don't know how to
Yeah.
process that. So no wonder we're all over the place. So I wanted to create things that would give people a perspective that they could live this way without sacrificing. So the first
So
business
how
was a
did
bakery.
you, yeah, how did you learn that there was another way? Like, where did you come up with some of the things you decided to try instead of the medicine?
So I took everything out of the house that was white sugar, white flour. My kids were so mad. No more cookies, no more Sunny Delights. The regular way that we used to eat. And I still gave, it took years for me to get off of the first it was, well, I hadn't eaten red meat at all since when I was
Okay.
pregnant with my daughter. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to do that. Um, but the fish and the chicken took time. And my kids were used to I bake. I've been baking, I think, since I've been born. One of the things my grandmother used to make is a pineapple upside down cake
Oh,
in a
sure.
cast iron pan. And she had me from that point on. From that day, I've been just baking. So I couldn't, and my dietitian was like, try not to use white flour, don't use white sugar, um, and some other things. They still were using eggs. But I was like,
Mhm.
okay, well, and then I learned about flaxseed and flax meal. And we didn't have Google in the way that it is now. So you kind of like listen to radio, see an ad in the paper, kind of get snippets of information, read
Mm.
books. Obviously, we went to the library back then because that's
Yes.
pretty much how we got all our information. And I started making brownies and cookies and stuff for my kids that didn't have the regular stuff in it.
Mm.
And then people always came to my house for like football games and stuff because I cook. I've just been chefing forever. So they would come over for like, Super Bowl and stuff like that. And I would make them the stuff that didn't have the regular stuff in it. And they would be like, oh, this is so good. I'm like, well, do you know that this is not made with white sugar? This is made with maple syrup or it's made with applesauce or something like that. And they're like,
Yeah.
nah, you're kidding me. Like, yeah. So I was like, well, they were like, well, you should sell this. So at the time, I was working at Bank of America as a consultant, and we did focus groups on product all the time. So I did a focus group on my desserts. I put a couple of them in the cafeteria. I gave a form anonymously and asked people would they buy it? Did they like it? What did they like about it? Did they know it didn't have all the regular ingredients? They said they didn't really know. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just start selling desserts. So that's where Naturally Sweet Desserts came in. I started making brownies and I was going to places like in front of Jacobi Hospital in the Bronx
Mm.
because that's where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can go and then and it also required an education because my brownie is like $3, $2. Well, back then it was probably two. These days it's five, but back then it was two. But Twin Donut sells a donut for 75 cents.
Mm.
And we'd have to have and I did that farmers markets because I wanted the conversation. I want them
Mm-hmm.
to know that there's a difference
Mm-hmm.
between the two. And if it tastes good enough for you to come back every week all summer long for a farmers market, then it might be something that you might do on your own. And then I started
Mm-hmm.
realizing that I can guide and coach people, but that flavor and lack of sacrifice is a big thing. You can't just tell
Mm-hmm.
people, don't eat this, and then give them cardboard. It has to be so delicious that they
Right.
don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So and I continued creating things. And once I got better and better at what I was doing, and at some point, no dairy, no meat, no fish at all, my kids were like, but they're teenagers, they were like, oh,
Yeah.
mom, but they still eat my food.
Yep.
And then I just created a couple of more businesses to kind of, because I like cooking and I like the fact that you can be so creative and just blow people's minds with the
I love
food
that.
and
Yeah.
having them be healthy was like
Mm-hmm.
the once people started coming back and bringing their grandmothers and stuff to the booth and be like, she's a diabetic and I eat her muffin every weekend. Come every weekend I come for a blueberry muffin, and I don't get sick, Grandma. And Grandma,
Mm,
who hasn't had a dessert in a while because she feels like her life is closed
yeah.
now because she has this disease, comes in. It's just like nothing better than knowing that you can actually change somebody's perception and possibly help them get healthier.
Totally. And I love then, so it was kind of a gradual step-by-step journey for you. You didn't throw everything
Hmm.
out at once, but you started by getting rid of white flour, white sugar. You weren't doing
Hmm.
red meats, and little by little you moved away from other animal products. And then it
Hmm.
sounds like you moved away from dairy products, eggs, milk, cheese. How
Yes,
long did it
yes.
take you to make that transition from when you decided to start changing how you ate to being completely plant-based?
Probably I've been completely plant-based 10 years. So probably four and on and off because the thing is that I started immediately by just I'm not eating any of it and then I lost so much weight that
Mm,
people were like, "Are you sick?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just not eating meat." And I would talk and my none of my people were trying to hear any of that.
yeah,
I lived in New York
yeah,
and
yeah.
there was nothing that had anything to do with plant only food.
Right. It was
So,
a very strange concept to most people.
yes, and there was nothing really for me to buy.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
I
very
would
hard
have
to
to
find some
like
of those things.
there was no, I mean, there was soy milk, but I never
Hmm.
liked it. I didn't like the flavor. And we didn't, and I also, as a side comment, would love to do a white paper or a study on soy
Mm,
because Asians and Indians have soy in their diet on a regular basis, but
hmm.
they do not have the same propensity for issues that we're supposed to have, African American women are supposed to have to soy is what and all the
Interesting.
things that I've been so I'm like, why is that? And is that propaganda?
Yeah.
So I
I think
know
that would be a great line of investigation. So I'm going to encourage you to do
I've
that
been
and come
wanting
back
to
and share your
investigate that
results.
so much. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
I love it. And I like how you
because it
think, 'cause
doesn't
you're
make
always
any sense.
thinking, yeah, always exploring new things. And so, like, over those 4 years, when by the time you got to be completely plant-based, were you still on 4,500 milligrams of metformin a day,
Oh
or
no,
how
no,
had
no.
that changed?
I stopped taking medicine uh the not taking medicine stopped after the 4 months after the doctor said you're going to be in dialysis. I didn't go back, and I said I would not recommend, but I'm just gonna wing it. And then every month they would be like, "Oh, Miss Johnson, come back for your test," and it'd be like 108, and I'm like, "Oh, you're doing so good." I'm like, "Oh, thank you." I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him until 6. I wanted to make sure
Yeah,
that I knew what I was doing before I said, this is not working for me. I haven't taken any medicine at all. And I'm reading stuff about hibiscus tea, which I've been
hmm,
taking forever. It helps with blood pressure. I'm
hmm,
coconut milk, coconut oil. Most of the studies that I did were from the diaspora, from Dr. Sadie, from a lot
hmm,
of the Caribbean folk in my neighborhood that talk about hibiscus, that talk about different kinds of things that they eat that
hmm,
helps with the body. Even just going to the library and understanding what basil does, what
mm.
oregano does, cinnamon. Diabetics should have cinnamon in every possible thing that they could eat because it's really, really great. It helps to, you know, decrease your A1C.
Yeah,
So I was doing a lot of that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So I kind of felt like I didn't need to do it anymore. Although I did not do it because I was thin and wasn't eating enough protein, wasn't getting enough calories in.
yeah.
I didn't know. It took me
Right.
years to kind of figure that out. Even now, still, I'm just like, and now that I'm almost 60, it's different because what my body needs now and what it needed when I was running around with my kids is different.
Yeah. So
So it's
how
a
long did it
constant kind of
take
thinking.
you? Right, you kind of stopped the medications early on. How long did it take you to actually normalize blood sugars? Were you able to bring your hemoglobin A1C down to, I don't know, something under 6, under 5.5? What did
Yeah,
you end up seeing?
six, 6.5. Six was a general number. It took me about the same period of time. By the time I got into my fourth year, 3.5 to fourth year. No, it didn't even take that long. That's why, because I was getting the annual checkups just to convince myself that I was not just, because you can walk around and
Right,
not know.
right.
So, no, I think it didn't take long at all, actually. I think the what took the most time was me figuring out the proper combination
Hmm.
of vegetables, carbs, protein, etc., so that
Hmm.
I can be strong and healthy and not
Yeah,
thin and taunt. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Sometimes if we
right.
just because we don't really know what the right combo, it takes time a while. Everybody's body is different. But
Hmm.
oh, I've been it must have been at I would say 2 years in.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds about right. I think easily can be done in that amount of time, especially when you're like experimenting and not really knowing what you're doing with food
Mm-hmm.
balancing, because food balancing
Mm-hmm.
is something important when you're whole food plant-based and you're dealing with blood sugars. So like, getting some support around that can be super helpful. And I congratulate you for sticking with it and continue to experiment till you figured out by trial and error what really worked for you. And so, like, when you go back and see the doctor now, like, how many years in did you finally tell them what you were doing? I'm kind of curious.
I moved around a bit, and then when I would go to a new doctor to get like the physical, and they would say, do you have diabetes? And I would say, well, no. However, I was diagnosed years ago, and they were like, "Oh, let's just take the test just in case." And they're going to start to write the scripts out, and I'd be at a 6 and
Uh-huh.
102, and they were like, "Wow, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I just eat vegetables and grains and legumes. There's protein there. You don't
Yeah.
animals, rhinoceri. I would give them the whole." Strong people, eat plant thing. And they were like, okay, yeah, Miss Johnson. They were always very dismissive because they
Hmm.
either didn't believe me or expected me to have some sort of ailment where I would have to come back in and they'd be like, see, I told you,
Yeah.
this is a chronic disease and, dialysis is like inevitable. I'm like, no, it's not. You're not killing me or taking me away from my kids. It was always
Mm.
your why is really, really important because it's tough. It's tough because there's no community. There's nobody who's there with you when you have
Mm.
holidays and stuff. There's nobody to eat with. They laugh at you. You're tired. It takes some time to kind of build up your strength and your confidence. And you have to have a reason to want to
Hmm.
be the only around everywhere you are. Having community, that's why I also created some of my businesses because the community is important. But if it wasn't
Hmm.
my children, because if I died, which I knew everybody that I knew that was a diabetic was amputee,
Right.
was in dialysis, or was
Mm.
dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that wasn't happening to me.
And I'm just so excited to have you share how even without guidance, and now there's all kinds of experts and coaches and
And
communities where you
food.
can get what you need. But look what you were able to do, even just doing it on yourself because you were so motivated and just like learning and like trying to research and figure out what would work for you. And you managed to get that diabetes completely under control, actually reverse the diabetes because when you're at a 6, you're not diabetic anymore.
Right.
And be able to figure out how to be healthy and have energy and all of that. And so I think that's such an encouraging story. And I know that one of the things that you have created as a resource for people that might be in this transition or trying to figure out what to do on the food piece, how to transition to a whole food plant-based diet, is that you develop custom plant-based meal plans. Tell us a little bit about that, because there's going to be a link below this video where people can access that. But what is it and what will they get when they click on the link?
So a few of my clients who were customers of Night Owl Vegan, which is my private chef business and meal plan business, Um, they wanted recipe. Well, they were both struggling with ailments. The
Mm,
husband was struggling with prostate cancer, and the wife was struggling with prediabetes. And they knew my story. And they were like, "Well, can
hmm
you just make me, a couple of recipes?" And I'm like, "Okay, I can figure that out." So we would have a conversation about what things they like, what things they don't like. We also would have the conversation about a mushroom is not steak. So just when I put a portobello mushroom on the menu, it tastes like a portobello mushroom. It's the portobello mushroom's loveliness. It is not gonna taste like a porterhouse. So just
Yeah.
let the vegetables shine for what they are. Don't be like, oh, this is not good because it doesn't have the texture of steak. It's not animal flesh.
hmm
So it's not gonna. And then I sneak in a little bit about, the antibiotics and the steroids and how eating plant-based is better for us from a sustainability perspective. If they really know
hmm
what happens to a chicken, how other chickens kind of walk over it and all that stuff. And they're like, give them a couple of videos because my goal is to move them to be like a Trojan horse and give them some food. But I'm really trying to move them to being vegan because
hmm
we need as many people eating plant-based as absolutely possible. So
hmm
we started with a couple of meal plans, and what they include is all the recipes with images. They're custom. So you tell me what it is you like and don't like. You also tell me what your dietary constraints are. For instance, if you have prostate cancer, you have to be really, really careful about potassium, and you have to be careful about hydration. It's a couple of things that you can and can't have. Whereas if you're diabetic, you have to worry about pastas and rice, maybe. So I give them stuff like fonio and farro, things that they wouldn't normally eat,
hmm
they have no idea about, but I'm
hmm
introducing new foods that are good for their health. So they get a month of recipes, um, including all the grocery lists for all of the recipes for the entire month. Kind of one of the worst things. You go on YouTube or something, you're gonna do this recipe, and then you look
Yeah.
them, and you're like, "Damn, I can't do because I don't have all of these things." So they
Right.
all have all the ingredients in separated, telling you frozen, fresh, etc., seasonings, etc.
Make it easy.
I
Yeah.
tend, I tend to season. I love seasonings, and I love
hmm
herbs,
hmm
medicinal properties, but also great way to cook if you don't want to use a lot of salt
hmm
because it's the flavor that you're really, and then you can get, vinegar or lemon juice or something if you need that little
hmm
zing, or even
Yep.
just a little bit of salt, but not a whole bunch. So, and
Yeah.
then also uh and a calendar that tells you what you should eat each day,
Uh-huh.
because you don't really know what to have for breakfast. What should I
Yeah.
have for lunch? I want a snack. Geez, I don't even know what to have for dinner. I already had tofu on Monday. So, I kind of
Yes.
mix it up so you have some variety and that
hmm
it's fun. So you go
hmm
in, you get all the recipes, you go grocery shopping with the list, you have everything ready for a month. And what I find is that they get excited about the next month's worth of recipes. They're already all different, but it gets them cooking, which is the
hmm
most important thing about eating plant-based is, you have to cook. Because a lot of the times, the food that we want to eat is, unless you know for sure that the restaurant is not cooking your food at the same grill, they're cooking the meat or they're 100% plant-based, and then
hmm
you can't eat out every day. So it's
Right.
best to, teach them how to fish. I don't
Yes.
want you, I want you to be self-sustaining and self-confident in it. So what the free gift is a 7-day complete meal plan with grocery lists, recipes, and pictures.
hmm
So based off of all plant-based, and based off of a 2000 calorie diet. And there's breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner.
Okay, so that's all kinds of choices for people to experiment with, even if you just do like 1 day a week where you experiment with
Yes.
some of these kinds of foods and kind of get yourself a little bit of a core repertoire, things that you and your family enjoy, and Build it from
Mm-hmm.
there. It doesn't have to be all overnight. I mean, look, it took Charmaine a few years to get it all together,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to take you that long. You could do it in a few months with this kind of support. So I just really want to say thank you, Charmaine, for being here with us today. I've really appreciated you sharing your story, and I know that our listeners are going to find it inspirational and take something you heard today and just make a next small step for yourself in the direction of healthy eating. Because remember, health is wealth and it comes by choice, not by chance. So thank you
Absolutely.
for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.